Yeah, I think we are live now.
Yes.
Yeah. So, good evening, everyone. Delighted to be with all of you this evening. And before we begin the session, I'd like to thank the organizer of this Lit Fest, Kalinga Literary Festival. And today we are going to have a discussion on the making of a book. So, as we all know that we are celebrating the 100th birth anniversary of Satyajit Ray, and three of us are Satyajit Ray enthusiasts. My name is Premanko Goswami, and I work as an executive editor at Penguin Random House. I am with my colleagues Pinaki De, who is who has designed the book. He is also an associate professor, teaches literature. I am also with my friend Rithi Goswami. Rithi is the co-editor of the book. He has co-edited the book along with Sandeep Ray, and I am really excited about this evening. So, just to set the context of this evening, we are talking about this book. So, this
I
is
am really excited
th-
about this evening.
thank you. So, this is Three Rays by Satyajit Ray, which includes the writings of Upendra Kishore Ray Chaudhary, Shukumar Ray, and Satyajit Ray. And the beauty of this book is that everything is translated from the Bengali original by Satyajit Ray himself. In addition to that, there are a couple of previously unpublished stories of Satyajit Ray, which he wrote when he was in Shantiniketan. He was a student there. Uh, Apart from that, there are plenty of illustrations, sketches, and this is a big book, and we were all super excited when we were making this. So this evening is only to thresh that out, to share that excitement, that sense of creative process with all of you. So I don't think I need to introduce Satyajit Ray here, but just to set the context, we all know that he was one of the most eminent filmmakers of our times. He was globally well known. What we know of him is that we know him as a filmmaker, but he wrote extensively, and he not only wrote for children and young adults. His writings have universal appeal, and that's the reason why his writings are so popular. While his writings were largely confined to the Bengali audience, because he wrote mainly in Bangla, there are a lot of works which are less known, and it's due to that reason Ray as a writer is less known outside Bengal. So here we are going to celebrate Ray's writings, and to begin with, I would like to ask Rithi, who has co-edited the book, to talk about the initial days. So we began the discussion in, I think, late 2018, and then in 2019, early 2019, things fell in place. So it was at a very conceptual stage, and from there we got the ultimate thing, the real product, which is a book. So I'd like to ask Riddhi that you know how did you make the first step, because there was plethora of material. How did you begin? And you tell us about how we initially conceptualized this as a book of 200 pages, and where the journey eventually ended. Over to you, Ritik.
Yeah. Thank you, Pramanko. Good evening to all of you. And firstly, thanks to the organizers of Kalinga Literary Festival for inviting us for this lively discussion on a fantastic book that we are fortunate enough to work on. So as Pramanko we rightly mentioned that it all began in late 2019 when we from the Satyajit Ray Society were discussing with Penguin India and Pramanko about some possible titles of the book, and then Mr. Sandeep Ray, who's also the member secretary of the Rai Society, he suggested that we bring out a volume of Satyajit Ray's translations, as well as the translations of his father and grandfathers, because You see, as Pramanko rightly mentioned, very little is known about Satyajit Ray, the writer, outside Bengal, and not many of his books have. Some of his books, of course, have been translated, but not very widely circulated, maybe. So, and that was the point where we started actually. So we first began to we worked with stories of Ray. Some of them were already published, and then we chanced upon the nonsense rhymes, which and Shukumar Rai's father was was a pioneer of nonsense rhymes in Bengal, and it's such a difficult task to translate them from Bengali to English, keeping the original flavor. So it's actually a not a translation, I would say, a transcreation of the original writings. And then there were his grandfather, Upendra Kishore Rai Chaudhary's folk tales. And so the different types of writings, and he translated with such an ease. So we chanced upon more and more writings. Initially, it was a 200-page book with a few stories and the nonsense rhymes translations and the folk tales translation. But later on, and then what happened? The lockdown happened. So what happened in the lockdown is that Shandip Rai, he chanced upon some more articles, some more stuff of Satyajit Ray from a loft, which was which was unaccessed for about say 50 years, and from there we got 3 to 4 manuscripts, fantastic manuscripts of his translations, which he maybe initially planned to publish, but later on maybe he dropped the idea, and there from there we came upon the televised script of a Professor Shonku story. We came upon a full another translation of a Professor Shonku story, and another interesting feature of this book was Gupiga in Bhagabain is a very popular Bengali film based on his father Supendra Kishore Rai Chaudhary's story, and he wrote a full-fledged English scenario for that. It may be he worked like that. It was a full with storyboards and sketches and doodles and everything, and we on that very point we jumped on that and we agreed to publish it. And because it was a fantastic takeoff on children's literature, so that's where we started beginning actually, and more we telephone Pramanko after maybe every week, and it kept adding on and on and on. The number of pages went up, and it was a tough call for Pinakida also to design the whole thing, as it kept in a fluid state for a long number of time, giving him a very nightmarish job, I must say. So, but it went. But we were all excited to do this. Yes, of course. And then I would ask Pinakida to share his thoughts as a designer. Yeah, Pramanko, you would add something to this.
Yeah, so we are going there. So I'll direct this question to Pinaki in a slightly different way. So Pinaki, you remember we also discussed the idea that whether Ray is relevant. He wrote for a very long time. He wrote during in the 50s, in the 60s. There are a lot of un, uh, I wouldn't say unpublished. They are published, but they are you know
Yep.
lost in the oblivion. Some
Right.
people, and Shondipta very, meticulously preserved with, uh, so I would say that, and he died in 1992, and we brought the book out in 2021. So at
Right.
one point, as an editor, I was thinking whether Ray's writings are relevant, because we grew up with, Ray's titles, because they were very much, part of our childhood.
Right.
But I think that the response we got from the
Oh,
market, that was phenomenal. So Pinaki, I would like you to throw some light on the fact that how Ray's writings continue to remain so relevant. His illustrations are so, I would say that relevant, contemporary, at times
right.
avant-garde. uh, and you had to design Ray, who was a designer, who was
Very
so, so, so,
difficult.
so
Very, very difficult. Yeah.
tell us
Pramanko,
about that.
Okay, okay. So, I mean, Premanko and Riddhi has given a wonderful introduction to the entire book. Let me hold the physical book. It's actually very, very thick, right? So this is what the book looks like. Now, first of all, to answer this question, whether Ray is relevant, Ray is relevant, and we have found out, time and time again, whether you redo the films, whether you do the other stuff and all that, he is relevant. One of the reasons I think he is relevant is because even during his time, he was a bit ahead of his, age. So when we were reading him, say around 1990s, say for example, right? I think Premanko, Riddhi, and I are of the same age, around the same age. So we were reading Ray, almost voraciously consuming Ray during 1990s. But what is Ray writing about? Ray is writing about, say, science fiction, right? So people say, regional science fiction was not, that much, a kind of a regular thing. In Bengali, it is huge, but in other language, I haven't found that extensive array of science fiction. So, say, Professor Shonku's stories are all science fictions, adventure stories, right? So, what actually sort of influenced us during that time, I curiously find that my son, even today, finds it equally stimulating. And the second reason I think is the variety. Ray's variety of, stories are, amazing. So in this book, for example, and it's only a sampling of what Ray did because he's a much, he wrote, much more than this only. But even this sample provides us a very good glimpse of what kind of writings Ray was writing. He was writing about supernatural stories, he was writing about relationships, he was writing film scenarios, he was writing science fictions, detective stories, all. So he was juggling with a lot of genres, right? So that makes him a very multifaceted person. Of course, as a filmmaker, we all know him as a multifaceted person, and this Renaissance-like quality was inbuilt in him. Remember, even in filmmaking, he used to do his posters, his music, whatnot. I mean, so that actually also percolated in his writing. As far as illustrations are concerned, one very interesting thing about Ray is his lines, because they are all line drawings, right? Most of them, of course, he did some other stuff, but mostly they are line drawings. In fact, there is a simple thing we always, tell, we love to tell that Ray is a hard line artist, hard line, not no pun intended. Hard line means he used to draw with hard lines, which actually, it is very easy to, for people to relate, but very difficult to do unless you have complete control over the medium, over the pen, over the things that you are trying to do. It is extremely difficult. And here I think Ray's schooling in Kala Bhavan Shantiniketan came into play. He was there and he learned it. So it's not as if, it just came out of blue, but he actually used that skill in order to enhance the story. So whenever you used to read Ray's story, remember, the extra bonus we get is the illustrations. And this book, Three Rays, is actually, is that, it showcases not only Ray the writer, of course it does showcase Ray the writer, as Premanko and Ray did of testified, but it also showcase Ray the illustrator. And what a wonderful illustrator. So can you imagine, he is writing about a science fiction and there are illustrations, and we will show you some of them. In fact, we can show you some of the originals, the way he used to draw it. Remember, there was no computer during that time. So all were drawn by hand, and the magic of hand, comes out like nothing else. So Ray is relevant because of variety, because of the way he used to juggle with genres. And also, I think, last point, Premanko, before I slip into the design element of Ray, is the simple language. He was so direct, he's so lucid, he appeals to everybody. So, from a child to an adult, that's an appeal. That's almost like that's a appeal beyond age groups. So you cannot slot Ray. Ray cannot be slotted, and that's probably his advantage. Because the moment you slot somebody, they lose a bit of their universal appeal, right? but here you cannot slot him, and everybody has something for them if they go to Ray. So that's also a very interesting point. If I go to read Ray, my child will discover something, I will discover something, my friends will discover something. So everybody has something in it. And that's probably the reason, Premanko, you must testify to it, and you may testify to it, is the phenomenal sales figure we have after the release of this book. Okay, it is already a super bestseller, if I'm not mistaken. But I think this goes beyond the bestseller tag, and Premanko always tells me this. And remember when Riddhi, I, Premanko, and Shondipta initially sat in his room, in the iconic, Bishop Lefroy room, and thought of doing this Ray library, we were very sure of the paths that we want to take. And one thing that was we are almost sure that this cannot go wrong, because this cannot go old. I mean, if this goes wrong, then our whole faith in the way publishing works and reader consumption works will fail. But even going beyond reader consumption, this book will be sold even after 10 years, 20 years, 25 years. It has got that classic appeal. And that is what makes this book so important. Okay, so maybe a bit on the design part, then I can give it back to you all. Maybe I'll show. Okay, so designing the book was a bit of a challenge. As you can see, it's a big book. First of all, the format. For the format, let me thank Penguin India, because they have actually, and of course to Premanko, but also to all the people who are involved in the production, who are involved in, the preparation of the final files. So there were a lot of people walking behind the scenes, as it is.
And during the pandemic,
when half of Penguin office were actually down with COVID, and it was a very difficult time. But first of all, this is not flattery, but this is absolute grateful. Really grateful to Penguin, the way they have marketed it, the way they produced it. First of all, look at the cover. They used I designed the cover, but it's also a credit to Penguin that they used exactly what we wanted, a Pantone gray. And so it makes it very, very interesting. So if you can look at the cover, it makes a very interesting statement, a kind of style statement. Okay. So next, I think the next point first of all, as Premanko has pointed out, it is difficult to do a Ray book. And I'll tell you why, because Ray himself was a great designer. So, for me, it's a humbling thing. First of all, he's my guru.
And there is always a huge expectations.
Huge expectations. And if I go wrong, you can be slaughtered, so there is no credit in getting this right. People expect you to get it right, because if you don't get it right, you are slaughtered. Right? Because, Ray as a designer is probably one of the greatest designer India has ever produced. So first of all, my first consideration was the font and the layout. Okay. And we chose with a lot of care. We wanted to project a font which is very readable across the age spectrum. So if you look at it, the whole thing is very spaced out. It's not so congested. We actually laid out sumptuously in order to sort of go through every age. So a person, say a child of, say, 12 years can read the rhymes of Shukumar Rai, and then a 70-year-old man can actually, or a woman can actually read a Shonku story, and there will be no jerk in the way they do it. So that's number one consideration. Number two is the way to integrate his illustrations. Remember, his illustrations were published in both Sandesh first, okay, and then it was published later on in places like, as you all know, in other books when it came in book format, right, from the Bengali publisher they have signed in. So there is a lot of choice to make. What we included every illustration, but where to put it, how to integrate it with the text. Will it run properly with the text? Will there be a readability problem? So all these things came into play. And what I did was, for this book, I didn't do the layout completely in computer. So I did it a bit physically, just like Ray would have done the initial part, and then only I put it into computer. So that is why there is so much of space, so much of stuff which actually stands out right across the book. Okay, and the last one is that I wanted to talk about is, the minimalist approach and have a maximalist effect. So basically, Ray was a master of minimalism. One stroke and things would have been live, right? And so even the cover, as you can see, is very, very minimalistic, right? It is absolutely not, full of everything. And I've used Ray's elements only in order to pay tribute to the man, because you don't need to invent too much, but what you need to think is to reorganize it to make it more relevant in the modern times. I can show you some of the original paintings of Ray. If can I just share the screen and I can just go on and can you see the screen? I don't know whether you can see the screen. Can you see the screen? Can you see the screen? Can the screen be seen? Hello.
Yeah. Now it's visible.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Wonderful. So within the book, we have inserts, and they are colored inserts, and that's also one of the highlight of the book. And it's not one page, 2 page colored insert. It's a whopping 24-page insert. So you can easily understand that is also one of, part of the book. It's the heart of the book, literally and metaphorically the heart of the book as well. So we have used all the archival materials that we have in the Ray Society, say the old Shandesh, the old magazines from which a lot of these writings were collected. We have also used Ray's cover designs. These are actually designs made by Ray when he was working for Signet Press. This is Tuntuni's Boy. This is a Bengali cover design for his grandfather's book, Upendra Kishore's book that he did for Signet Press. And you can see, a different kind of Ray here. So what we did was we had a lot of, letters as well, small stuff here and there, which we integrated within the book. So these are all the iconic Shandesh covers. Some of them are actually done by Shukumar Rai himself, drawn by Shukumar Rai himself. And then you can actually see some of the drawings later on that was done by Ray himself. So you can see this is, of course, Abul Tabul, which is one of the very interesting books published by Ray's father, Shukumar Rai, who himself was a ace designer and a poet, right? So too was Upendra Kishore. And this is Ray's iconic design of his father's book. So what we did is very, very interesting. And these are all publications that came out in old magazines. Remember, all these things were actually there in old magazines. And so it came out in small magazines which are not available anymore. So that way we actually put this out. So you can see a lot of handwriting, scripts. These are original scripts, original writings. And you can see, Ray's design of Shandesh, the iconic Shandesh magazine. These are all designed by Ray. And you can see the variety there as well. So many kinds of, styles used. And these are mostly meant for children. And you can see his expertise there. This is one of the original. You can see the marks here and there. This is an original drawing done by Ray for Shandesh. This is a rare thing that we actually put out from the archive. You can see even the marks today, even the dots and small marks that are there. You can see these are logos designed for Shandesh. And this is a sample of an original thing. So you can see the pen marks. You can see, the ink marks that actually led to the formation of the original. You can see the whiteness, just to correct things. So can you see how good he was? There is barely a missed point. Nothing actually is amiss in the way these drawings were actually done by Ray himself. So you can see, let me increase this so that you can see here. This is Ray's own drawing, and you can easily understand the brush strokes, the ink, the volume of ink, and the small things that Ray put in order to make the drawing come alive. Look at this beautiful line drawing. As I was telling, he was a hard line artist. He used to use hard lines. But even there is this soft quality, this delicate quality that comes out. It points to us, it points to everybody, the kind of artist he was. If he was not a filmmaker, he would still have been fated as one of the greatest artists living in India. who actually worked in India. So look at this painting. This is actually from Bonku Babu's friend, remember, which later became a script for Alien, which was supposed to be picked up by Columbia Pictures. It never happened, that book. But this is actually a painting, it was from Shondesh, and you can see that. So all these things are actually there. This is again another work by Ray. And can you see, even in color drawings, you can see the translucence that he uses, that he achieves. So these is, very colorful, but can you see the way he achieves that maximalist effect from being extremely minimalist? And that's the hallmark of Ray. So we can actually talk about this again and again, and I suppose I've taken a lot of your time. So let's get back to the main thing. Premanko, Riddhi, all of you are are welcome to add something here and there, because I think this gives us a fair idea of the kind of consummate writer, illustrator, designer Ray was.
I
Can we
think
hide
that
this?
was
Yeah.
that was really very enlightening, because we were involved in the process
Right.
on a day-to-day basis. So and I still get those goosebumps when I look at the book, and I actually savor it almost every day. And this book has universal appeal. I have seen children picking up the book. uh, Last weekend I saw a very elderly person. She was relishing the book. So that makes a publisher or an editor very happy. It makes an editor's day. So while I would come back to Pinaki, and I would ask him to gather his thoughts on typography, because
Oh,
he
yeah.
yeah, Ray was obsessed with typography, and probably
Right.
and he also I think designed two
Right.
typographies.
Three. Yeah.
uh, yeah, three. So while you gather your thoughts, my question is to Riddhi, is that Riddhi, when you look at the translations, so you and Pinaki were probably the first ones who saw those translations before I saw it.
Right.
So I can
Yeah.
imagine the sense of
Right.
wonder. So
Uh,
tell us about the translations, because one thing is that, as you have rightly said, Riddhi, is that the idea of transcreation. He doesn't
Absolutely.
translate them,
Yes. Yes.
literally,
Yes.
but he takes it to a different height altogether. So tell us about exploring those translations, reading them. I know you are a huge Ray fan from your childhood, so tell us about that process.
Yeah, actually, one thing, when he wrote for essentially for children, right? So one thing is very much discernible in his writings is a sense of wonder in his writings. There is there. So be it his short stories, be it his adventure Feluda stories, novels, or be it Shonku science fiction stories. So one thing he always added is that an extra thing is there apart from the plot line, is there in Feluda stories. He is writing for adolescents, right? So there was a there is always some information about the places that Feluda went, and some interesting aspects of history which were added to the plot line. So we were not aware of the fact before that Feluda went to Lucknow, he visited Bada Imambara, he visited the residency and this and that. And so all these bits of history is coming alive with the detection. So he intervened those facts in the detection. That's fantastic. When we were child, we were swept up these things, and we were introduced to these facts for the first time in our life. And not, that is an interesting thing. That facts were being introduced by a storybook, not through textbooks. So that is a very interesting thing. And later on, when we were, let's say, maybe 14, 15 now years of age, and there the a bit more mature Professor Shonku stories were appealing to us, and he wrote on a variety of genres of science fiction. It may be of invisibility, it may be on time machine, it may, and he, I just wonder, and now we are in the age of Alexa and so many gadgets, and he actually wrote about that 30 years back. even 40 years back. In this story, they tell us, it's there in the book. We are reading about a computer who knows every answer to all the questions. So that's the beauty of Ray. See, he was well ahead of its time. And if you read the Arjo Shekhar's life and death of Arjo Shekhar, it's, I think, the most complex story of the book. It is very much philosophical type of thing, and we are aiming at maybe some questions to which we don't know the answers yet. It's a very different type of Ray story, I must say. And we need a bit of time to fathom in the actual thing which he is trying to say. But apart from that, the general stories or the short stories, there are human feelings which are underlined all the way. So be it in uh, uh, Bonku Babu's friend, or maybe the laughing dog Brownie in Oshamanju Babu's dog. He finds a dog who laughs, right? And he won't sell the dog for money because he's not greedy, and he talks of simple human emotions. So that's the kind of variety we see in Ray's stories. And apart from that, in the translations, yes, in Shukumar Rai's translation, as I said, there is a nonsense factor, yes, but it's also the if you go beyond that, there is again something else. So if you read it at a matured age, you get something else out of that, apart from pure laughter. Yes, its laughter is there, fun is there, humor is there, but you get something else when you read it in matured age. That is why they're timeless.
Riddhi,
That's
can
the
I
beauty.
add a
Yes,
word?
yes, yes. Of course, of
One
course.
word is, I think, quaintness is something, I
Yes,
always
yes,
associated with,
yes.
Ray's
And
story.
Pinakida and Pramanko, he writes his stories are about lonely people. Most of them are loners, right?
And very
So,
ordinary people at times.
yeah,
Very
very
ordinary
ordinary
people.
people, and they're put into extraordinary situations, and
Actually.
still they don't lose their head. Like Bonku Babu, he's a very meek schoolmaster. He comes across an alien one day, suddenly one evening, he comes across an alien, but it changes
Potol
his
Babu.
life. Yes,
Then
Potul
Bottle
Nokur
Babu,
Babu.
Babu.
absolutely, absolutely.
Nokud Babu.
No cool Babu, and
No,
this Oshamanjo Babu in Brownie, he comes across a dog who laughs and changes its life, his life. But there are these stories talk of human emotions, human values above everything else, and that there is a very strong moral attitude in all the stories. And because and again, at the end of the day, Ray was writing for children, so there is nothing unethical, nothing unruly. There is always a very strong moral attitude throughout all the stories. Yes, that is
but
how I look at it.
one thing is very important here, which you have said, Riddhi, and that's that raise I would say a kind of preoccupation with facts, right? Uh, if you
Yes,
read in
yes, of
Bengali
course, of
original,
course,
he would always say "totho," the fact.
of course,
Right.
of course.
So he would always you know emphasize that. Second is that his preoccupation with logical
Right.
conclusion.
I agree.
But at the
Absolutely,
same
absolutely.
time, he was obsessed with the idea of supernatural. He was
I
obsessed
agree.
with the idea of magic,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes, yes. That's
Probably
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that's
no, go
interesting.
ahead.
You see, Shonku is a scientist, right? Shonku is
Yeah,
a scientist. He
right.
is, but he, mind you, these stories are not so-called hardcore science fiction, so as to say, like like Isaac Asimov or Arthur C. Clarke or things like that. These are not hardcore science fiction. They are all
Yeah, yeah,
children stories. First of all, primarily they are all stories for children, and they have a background of science, where science is a tool for feeding the message he wants to give. That's how I look
right.
at it. So science is there, of course, and he has given a background of science to Shonku. And but initially it was in a very funny way. Shonku was a funny a typical cynical character, funny character. But later on he became mature, more and more mature with the things. But science fiction, it was a hardcore science fiction. It bordered on, maybe we can call it science fantasy as well. So
I agree. Right.
however you
Agreed.
name it, however you
Yeah.
name it. And
Also,
he
I think
always
one
looks at
thing,
the fact that
Riti, just
science. Yeah, sure. Pinakida. Yeah.
no, no, just to add one thing. Of course, there is a bit of a moral attitude, but Riddhi,
Yes.
you must agree, and Premanko, you must also agree with this, that it doesn't come out as a didactic message ever.
No.
So he never gives you a didactic message. So if there is a moral attitude, it's subliminal, subliminally
Definitely,
embedded within the
definitely,
story.
definitely, definitely.
That's just my attitude.
And yeah, yes, and Shonku is a scientist, but he faces he is there in so many supernatural situations. He never criticizes it. As a scientist, his mind is open. That means he is not taking science as a dogma. The science is not a dogma to him. He is open to ideas. He said that maybe in 20, 30 years, or maybe in future, science will be in a position to explain all the supernatural things. This is, of course, we there is a lot of we can debate on the on it for end. But yes, it's a very interesting attitude, and I think it appeals to children. It appealed to me as a children. It appealed to you as a children, and I think this is how that science fiction stories should be written for children with an open mind, where you face certain situations in life which you can't explain. So it's always there.
Right.
So I think that's interesting here, because at times you just want a magic wand to come, and everything
Yes,
changes after that. So I think what Shonku also experiences, right,
of
in
course.
his stories with Nokur Babu, and
Yeah.
Ray is not dismissive of that,
Yes.
which
Right.
cannot be explained
Absolutely.
by
Absolutely.
the logic. So this is very interesting. He doesn't completely rule out supernatural, at least through fiction. That's a
Right.
very
Yes. Yes.
literary way of putting it. So I'll go back to Pinaki now, and Pinaki again. This idea of how
Typography.
he would create that impact with the typography.
Yeah.
You know,
So
uh,
typography, Premanko, one thing is, of course, he actually created four, frankly, four typescripts. But, again, typefaces basically, not, I mean, scripts would be too much because he never put it in commercial use. So four, so there is this one called Ray Roman, Daphnis, Holiday Script, and Ray Bizarre, right? So, and if you look at Bizarre, it almost appropriates certain Bengali characters as well. He always wished to do a lot for Bengali typography, which he couldn't find time for. I mean, I just wish he would have done it, and then we would have been immensely benefited. But you are right. Ray. One of the reasons he was, yeah, interested in typography. Look, he was self-taught in typography, right? So when he was in DJ Kimmer, he learned a bit of typography from people who are more experienced, right? And there are mentions of that, in interviews here and there. But he is not, somebody who actually learned typography, because this is a very technical thing to learn, right? Because if you are not technically adept in, because there are measurements, it's basically maths and art, that comes together. But what actually attracted Ray towards typography is something that is also there in his films, the to achieve that sense of perfect balance, so he was so balanced in the way he used to approach. So if you look at his stories, it's it's almost balanced to the T. There is not even an extra word, extra information. Yes, he was going after facticity, but no extra information. What we called, slim stories, slim volumes, fatless. It's absolutely without digressions, fine. So similarly in his illustrations and
tight
type,
composition, and clarity of thought. Yeah,
absolutely, he knows what he's trying to do, and
yeah.
here is a man who is sure of what to do, what to achieve, what effect to do. He is somebody who is in total control. That is the idea that he used to project. It is in his films, similarly in his typography. So I think that sense of balance that typography provided. One of the problems, he never, laid out a book. So he designed certain book, but he couldn't lay out a book. So the way we lay out a book, for example, he didn't
Right.
do that. He didn't find time for, frankly. He laid out advertisements. He laid out Bengali books, even certain parts, not the entire thing, but certain parts when he was an art director at Signet, right? But to lay out a complete English book is something that he didn't do, right? What we have is the typefaces. What we have are the four typefaces. They're very, very interesting. And if you search the Google, you can see the typefaces and you can see the immense possibility that those typefaces have, right? Ray Society is trying to revive them as, viable typefaces. It will take time, but we are trying to do that. Uh, but again, coming back to your question, how does it influence him? I mean, it influences him because of the balance it achieves. Also, I think, I'll tell you one thing, typography is also extremely geometrical, right? Is
Hmm.
also, he loved to play with shapes. And if you see his films also, his backgrounds, the way he used to depict the composition of the film, the frame, or even in the book, you know, shape making or shape shifting is something that absolutely entrances him. And that is why those things that are there in typography, the play with shapes, geometry, proportion, okay, balance, all these things that he actually does in typography percolates in every sphere of life. We cannot overstress this, but this is there. I mean, we can feel that this idea, this big idea behind, this is the big idea behind Ray's mind, I suppose. It's very difficult to reduce him, to that, but it's one of the aspect of Ray that we can look at, focus at, and which we haven't done, too much. Because, if you look at a film like Gupi Gain Bagabain, and if you look at the scenario that he paints, remember, there we have a scenario in the book, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if you look at the scenes that he paints and the way he actually designs the lattices of the, of the say, of the background in Gupi Gain Bagabai,
yeah,
everything is done, right? Everything is done to the T. And I think two things are very important here. One is, of course, his amazing stint at Kala Bhavan, which, as you all know, where he came in close contact with Nandolal Bose and Binod Bihari Mukhopadhyay, but also his solid grounding in the advertising world, in 1940s, late 40s, 50s. Okay. He was there in advertising for almost 13 years. You have to understand. And he worked under people like Onnoda Munshi, and he had it with his colleagues like, brilliant colleagues like, O.C. Ganguly and all of these who are brilliant in their own right. So there was this, amazing peer, which surrounded him, and that probably helped him to shape his vision. So that is very, very interesting because we never think of Ray as a designer first or say an artist first. We always think of Ray as a filmmaker first. But if you look at his life, he was actually an artist first. He actually counted himself as a failed artist, Riddhi. I mean, he always thought that fine arts is not his, real
Forte,
thing,
yes,
right?
forte, yes, yes.
Forte. And then he went on to commercial art. He did advertising for 13 years, and he was not a just a small time advertiser. He was, remember, the art director of DJ
Correct,
Kima. He
correct.
became
Yes,
the art
correct.
director of DJ Kima, which is one of the best agencies in India. He went to London in 1950s. His book covers was already being exhibited in V&A, Victoria and Albert. So, and this is all before Pather Panchali. So you have to understand that, we have to look at it the other way as well. Ray, the designer, or the at least very metaphorically, designed through a lot of things, literally and metaphorically. So everything for him is related back to the very idea of those, of the balance that he achieves in design. I hope I made it clear. I don't know, I mean, whether this is understandable. So, everything stems from that idea of balance. When he went to film, he just transferred that idea of balance uh, to filmmaking. Okay? Remember, before Pather Panchali, he was a consumer book cover designer. Brilliant. And he got international fame. It's not as if he didn't get international fame before that. And So Pather Panchali completely took him to a different level, because that's moving picture. But even there, if you look at his, you have been there, right? So it's a great honor to look at his original stuff. You can see everything is planned to the T. Every moving scene is almost drawn to the T. Everything is there in place. So when he actually goes to the actual shoot, he knows exactly what he
It's
wants.
already planned.
It is already planned. So even this is same in case of writing. This is same in case of translation. So this book actually shows another aspect of Ray, which we never knew, that he is a superb translator. Very
Yeah.
soon, Premanko and Riddhi, the syllabuses across India will have originals translations, transcreations of Ray's original stories by himself. Because earlier we only got others, who actually did a brilliant job. Remember Gopa
Of
Mujumdar and
course,
Indrani
of course,
Mujumdar?
of course.
They are super translators. But remember, these are by Ray himself.
Himself.
Nothing can get better. And we have gone through the stories, Premanko. Remember, we went through them. And the translations are almost perfect to the T. There is not even a single exaggeration, from the original. He is such a meticulous worker in every aspect. I always think, and forgive me for telling this, but whenever I visualize Ray, I always think, even if he prepare a breakfast, probably he will probably design it to the T, to the perfection. He will just put everything in the right places. So to go inside this man, you need to follow his trail, okay, the way he developed as a human being. And only then I think you can make sense of the films that you see, of the world that he constructs, of the story world that he makes.
You know,
Sorry
he's
for the long
someone
answer.
who. No, that's absolutely fine. I think that what you tried to emphasize is that
Hmm.
he would never cut the corner. He would never compromise on the
Right.
quality, and the fact that he will think through everything, and his work is the testament of that. So we are almost at
Yeah,
47
there may
minutes.
be
We have
questions. I don't know
yeah,
whether
yeah.
there are questions.
The, there are a few very interesting questions.
Yes, yes.
So I think that these questions will also uh, give
The first
a
question
lot
I
of
can see,
leads.
Premanko, can I read it for you, because I think it is meant for you also.
So I
So
will go to
what
that
is more
question
coming
at
out
the
of?
end. So I would like to go to that question at the end of. I'd really love to
Okay,
answer that question, but
okay, okay.
there's a question which is for both you and Riddhi, and this question comes from Zahid Akhtar. So
Right.
Zahid asked these questions that, oh wow, interesting one to read and recommend. Don't
Comment.
you think the
Hello.
I think there's some kind of flow problem.
Uh,
language
yeah, Premanko, it's stuttering a bit.
Hmm. Yeah, the
Yes,
comment is
so
there.
I think so. Riddhi, do you want to take
Yeah.
this up, because we missed Premanko because he's
Don't you
frozen
think
now.
the actual flavor of original language would be missed in translation? Yes, of course. You cannot expect the original flavor in translation. Uh, but the stories that are based, the context of all the stories, I think it appeals to all the Indians at least. So it's a bit of universal context that the stories are set in. So we were hopeful that the stories would appeal across Indians, all Indians, to all Indians. That is why we were so much interested in publishing these translations.
And
So
also,
it had a
Riddhi, we
moving
didn't
effect.
put in a glossary. Frankly, we didn't put in
Yes,
a glossary.
deliberately we didn't put
We
a glossary.
wanted to be, because there is no need for a glossary, and you will see why. And this actually, we initially thought of a glossary. Riddhi, remember?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes. But we
And
didn't
the
put it.
language he used is so fluid and lucid, and it's, I think, understandable to all Indians. The
Right.
everyday
Right.
colloquial words that we use are there. So it's a not very archaic type of language that he used in Bengali.
Right.
So it's very easily translatable.
So Premanko, we were actually answering question of Jahid when you were sort of just
Yeah.
went missing
So
for a bit, for a blink.
Yeah, I got
But there are
disconnected. Yeah,
others also. Yeah. So Orunji has asked certain questions. So I hope we have
yeah,
answered Jahid's questions.
yeah.
Orunji has asked certain questions related to art. Um, will that be? Will I take that, Premanko?
yes,
Sure,
yes.
sure. Please, please.
Okay, so first of all, he has commented a lot. Thank you, Arunji, for really following us the whole conversation. First of all, um, what is your take on using minimalism in art, particularly in times of graphic arts using computers that attract the present generation? Okay, Ray never had the advantage of using computers in his art. So frankly, he couldn't use. So all was done by hand. So even during Ray's time, when he used to do the layout, even that layout was done on hand. It's physically. You paste things and you do the whole layout. So there was very little to correct things because if it goes wrong, once you cannot correct things easily. Okay, so that way I think their job was much tougher than us because now we have multiple erasure points, multiple points where we can actually change the whole thing, right? So but what I did was consciously I wanted to imitate that minimalist approach even in computer, in ages of Photoshop and in design, right? So what I did was when I planned the book, this was just a conventional, it could have been a very normal layout. It is a normal layout, but even then, to get the spacing right, I actually did it. I tried to tried to put it a kind of a digital print and put that in a pasted paper. I tried to do it in the way Ray would have done it, or at least people during that their time would have done it for at least 2, 3 stories. So yeah, I exactly know what are the measurements, right? And it doesn't have a mismatch between screen and print because sometimes when you see things in screen it doesn't translate exactly that way on print. So that way I used a bit of it, but minimalism was a simple decision because Ray I never thought was maximalist. He always tried to get maximum out of using the minimalist style. So just as a tribute to Ray, I tried to incorporate that element. Okay, so even if you look at the cover, for example, the three rays, this font, it is not Ray's font, but the way this is not also a very conventional font. I almost redesigned it in a way to pay tribute to certain qualities of Ray, which I find very exciting. So these are simple decisions we take because, but every decisions that we took, three of us and Shondip, of course, being the mentor of, we went through everything through him. One of the real things is everything should begin, and end in Ray. So it's basically a tribute book. The entire Ray library, Premanku will tell a bit more about it, is just a tribute to the person, the persona, the man, the mind of Ray. It's not about Ray and his stories. It's not about another group of stories that you need to tell. No, not that. But it is actually a tribute to the man, to the mind, the wonderful mind at work. Okay, so that's where I think the whole thing came in. And another question from Arunji is background in Shantiniketan helped, including typeface. Yes, it did.
Yes, of
And I've
course.
already answered it. Not only Shantiniketan, his stint as a advertising
Advertising.
professional also helped a lot. So I think he worked in DJ Kimmer. Remember, he joined in DJ Kimmer, and he worked there. From for a long period
Yeah,
of time.
for
Remember,
about
we he
13 years.
43,
Yes.
right? 1943 to
Yes. Yes.
56.
56.
Before he met Pather Panchali, he worked there, and that was also of great value. So he actually learned a lot of Eastern art, and he also got a lot of things from Western
He
art,
got interested in Chinese calligraphy, right? In Shantiniketan.
Japanese wash techniques. All these are
Japanese
also
wash
taught in
techniques.
Shantiniketan. So he
And he used those
actually
things in Bengali typefaces also.
also, yes. So these are there, and there is another question maybe for Riddhi. Will you take it? Premanku is back now. Any ideas about his inspiration? How he wrote science fiction? Say inspiration behind Professor Shonku. And you
Yeah,
know, Primanko, I
one
think.
inspiration is of course his father's. There was a character of Shukumar Rai. We all know about that. His Professor Heshoram Hushiyar, and another inspiration was there. There was another character, funny character, Nidhiram Patkel is there, and Ray himself was a great admirer of Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, and he was a great fan of them. So all these Arthur Conan
Maybe
Doyle and
Captain Challenger as well.
yes, Professor
Maybe
Challenger. Yes, Professor
Yes.
Professor
Challenger,
Professor
Professor Challenger, Professor Brainstorm, and all these. It was there in the back of his mind when he started writing science fiction. Yes, of course.
And also, he was regularly interacting, exchanging letters with some of the most celebrated
Yes,
science
yes.
fiction.
That that
Oh,
that is
Uh,
that is there with Asimov,
his
with
that is
Arthur
friendship
C.
also,
with Ray
Clarke.
Bradbury, Asimov, and Arthur C. Clarke is well documented, right?
Yes,
Arthur C. Clarke was a
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
very close friend.
yeah,
And
yeah.
he was actually the president of the first science fiction cine club in India. Yeah. So though it was a short-lived thing, but it was
But
a unique thing. Yes.
historically important.
Yes.
So, Premanko, can we take that question? The one that everybody is waiting for. What is more from Penguin Library? Who knows? Of course, we know, but please. I mean, I think it's Premanko who will, give it to us.
So, a very
There is huge
interesting
expectation,
question.
Premanko. You cannot get wrong now.
Absolutely. Because, first of all, we have a huge lineup, a lot of work in the pipeline. So, won't get into the details right now, but I'd
Right.
say only one thing: the way Three Rays, in a sense, uh, excited you. You loved it. Uh, I'm sure that the book which is in the making for 2022 will also similarly, offer you something really exciting. And our, effort is to uh, disseminate Ray's works to a wider spectrum of audience, and the amount of support we have got, it has actually strengthened our belief in the work. And I would say that there will be some good non-fiction fiction uh, next year, and we will definitely try to bring the book out around his birthday next year.
Right.
um, and I will keep you posted. So a lot of
Right.
good things are happening, but
Maybe one small addition,
yeah,
Premanko.
yeah,
One
yeah,
small
go ahead.
addition. Whatever it is, there will be materials which has not been seen before. So I think, is it fair to say, Riddhi, Premanko?
Yes, that's the USP, that
Yes, of
these
course.
are not previously published works.
Recycled works, right? Yeah.
They are not recycled, number one. Number two is that most of these works are out of circulation for a very long time, almost
Right.
for
Yes.
60, 70 years. They're out of circulation. And because of, I think, during this pandemic period, Riddhi, Pinaki, and of course Shondipda collectively discovered a lot of work, and they are on it, at it,
Right.
whatever you want to say.
You are also part of
Uh,
those discussions, so Premanko,
Yes.
we all know.
of course, but the excitement is that
Just as a
you
classic
and
publisher, he doesn't want to give everything out. Holding his
so so
cards
so
close to the chest.
so they will be amazingly brilliant, and we are
Right.
aware of what is happening now. So very excited about the possibilities. I can tell you that. And good things come to those who wait, right? So let's wait.
That's a good way to. So,
So I think
any more
we are
questions?
almost. I think we have
We don't know whether
covered
there are
almost.
Facebook stuff, right? Right. So we are not too sure of that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, we have covered everything, I feel.
Are you?
And
Yeah. Are you
it's
sure of
exactly,
that?
yeah. And we are exactly,
On
I
time?
think it's time.
On time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
We have actually 30 seconds to spare. So thank you
Oh,
so much.
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you
Just
so
like Ray,
much.
perfect. Cut
Yeah.
is the perfect.
So yeah, yeah. We thought through probably. Yeah. So thank you, Pinaki. Thank you, Riddhi. And
Thank you,
a big
Pramanka.
thanks to
Yes,
Kalinga
Of
Literature
course.
Festival organizers,
same from
Ashutosh,
here.
and everyone who is there, and to our audience. And I would, really encourage you to engage with our book Three Rays, and let us know, how we can, make our subsequent books even better. We would definitely take your feedback very seriously.
Yes, of course.
Thank you so
Suggestions
much.
are
Have
always
a
welcome. Yeah.
yeah, good night and have a wonderful weekend.
Good
Bye.
Good night.
night. Have a
Good
wonderful
night.
weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.